After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star as it's rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Messiah would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they, the wise men, went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Myrrh? Myrrh? And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, then they returned to their own country by another route. So we'll open off with just I'll open off with just some of the notes that I highlighted as I was reading this prior. Um, Verse 2, when it refers to King Herod asking, King Herod, oh sorry, the question was posed by the wise men, right? Where it says, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star as his rising, have come to worship him." That question alone, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? I have a note right here in my study Bible was saying that the question was posed by the wise men was an unintentional challenge to King Herod's reign, because a little thing about King Herod is that he was not a full Jew,
Mhm.
nor was he a descendant of David,
Mhm.
Mm,
right? So with that being said, he was not he wasn't qualified to
Right.
to to fit to reign in as king,
Right.
right? Um, and this kind of, you can see how by, and as I'm like kind of actually reading this again, this is kind of like foreshadowing like Jesus when he gets older, right? Because Jesus has been born. Jesus is that, right? Jew, right, descendant of David, like he is that. So it's literally like by birthright, like this is like the Jesus was king, was fit to be king. And when King Herod heard this, um, when King Herod heard this, right, and heard the reports by the legitimate, by the legitimate descendant to the throne, right? Like this made him like disturbed, right? Because things about King Herod and his reign, right? He was violent, he was paranoid, he would crash out a lot, essentially, and
Mhm.
and you could imagine like essentially being told that like, hey, someone someone came onto this earth. The true king of Israel is here. He's just been
mm,
born. Someone like King Herod's hearing this and it's like, hold on, what?
Mhm.
Someone's coming in to take what's mine?
Mhm.
Like we're not gonna have that. Like we're just not gonna have that.
Mhm.
And I have this little note right here, and then I'll open the board for someone else to chime in. Was that Matthew later described the star in the book of Matthew later on describes the star as moving through the sky in order to point to the wise men to Jesus' like precise location, right? In the sense of like it indicates that this wasn't like just a star, like how we see stars in the night sky, right? Like no, it was what at its rising was indicating that it mysteriously appeared in the eastern sky. So this star mysteriously appeared, but they recognized the star as if no, this is the star that is describing the signal the birth of the Messiah. Um, and God condescended to use these superstitions to draw them to Jesus. I mean, his son. And that's all I'll say. So if anyone by all means wants to come in, chime in, give their thoughts on just the section that we have.
For me, when I when you read that you read about the king being almost in fear of the birth of Jesus, I automatically thought of King Saul and how King Saul had that fear about David, and it just that idea alone exemplifies um the cost that someone will go to try to eliminate someone that might be trying to take over. So that's the thought that I had that kind of resonated with me. As you mentioned earlier about, you were going to be teaching on Samuel. So I was like, it kind of the two stories are parallel in a sense.
Oh, oh, absolutely. I think, I think if there's one thing that the what the Bible is always going to do is put two and two together, and what you kind of see in this theme, right? Which is like, I think the funny part about like how King Saul was disturbed, right? He was feared, and then you have King Herod, same thing, right? Is that you kind of have these things where it's like, okay, like someone like you just chose someone to essentially take, like I said, take what's mine, and like you said, and just the lengths that people will go through to like to try to preserve what's theirs, in other words,
Mhm.
to try to go against God's way, God's will,
Mhm.
right? Like I actually have this other point right here that I didn't even mention about King Herod was that in the past, just to protect his ruling, King Herod actually killed his wife and his sons just to protect his tyranny, his
Wow.
ruling, right? So it's just again, and I bring that up just to back up what you're saying about the lengths that people will go through to protect their ruling, right?
Mhm.
So it just backs up with what you're saying. But brother Mike, brother David, any thoughts you guys want to chime in on?
Well, I'll come in on the fact that when it starts to talk about the the wise men journey,
Hmm.
um, have that down. It's significant because it kind of strides towards the importance of seeking Jesus in a way. So,
Mm.
um, and it's the start of prophecy. So
Yeah.
I kind of connect it to those. I mean, it's a very simple thing that I look and that I got that came to mind as I was listening to you read it. And then I'd say another part is go back.
So I'll say
Go
this while
ahead.
David's finding the star really quick. Um, I notice too. I guess it depends on the version, but
Yeah,
they reference the wise men as Magi, which
Hmm.
which is I guess that's another translation
correct.
for wise men,
Yeah.
which is another translation for wise men. I don't know. I'd be interested to learn what that etymology is rooted in, to
Mm.
see why it's
why they're called that, because for the longest, in certain iterations, they're referred to as wise men, wise kings. I've heard of wise kings,
Hmm.
depending on who is actually teaching or who you're getting the message from. There's been different versions. So I thought that was another thing to point out, is that there's different iterations of this, and I like what David said about the recognizing the significance of the prophecy starting, because when we go back to chapter one, we talked about the genealogy
Hmm.
of Jesus, and now we're really starting to get into, we're kind of we're at the start, but we're about to get into the meat of the prophecy. And as you see, when we get down into verse 13, the next few verses, now is the story is really going to start to pick up, because then we start learning, just spoiler for our audience, let's start learning a little bit of King Herod's intentions.
Hmm.
And even Larry alluded to that a little bit too. So yeah, I think it's really important to understand that, like David was saying, that prophecy. But David, you had found your thought?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same thing. That other significant part was just the fulfillment of prophecy. Uh, Once again, the wise men, um, when they show up and they seeked him, uh, them surrendering, I think it was a fulfillment from Old Testament. So that's just where my thought was rising at. Also, as I was looking through my Ultimate Bible Dictionary, I was looking up Magi, and what it says right here is describes Eastern wise men, priests, and apostle or astrologer who were experts in interpreting dreams and other quote unquote magic arts. So I guess that's where the Magi term came from because they were
Mm,
interpreter of dreams.
mm,
So the phrase is used of those men who come to Palestine to find and honor Jesus,
okay.
the
Okay.
newborn king. They may
Okay.
have been from Babylon, Persia, or the Arabian desert. Matthew gives no number, names, or royal positions to the Magi. So that's what the my Bible dictionary tells me.
Shout out David for coming in clutch. Ultimate Bible Dictionary. Pick yours up. Pick your Ultimate Bible Dictionary up. If you haven't got that,
No,
tap in with it.
No, for real. Shoot,
sure.
I gotta get one too. I wanna allude towards verses 6 and 7, verses 6 and 7, um where you have the chief priests, right, and the scribes, right, because that's who King Herod summoned, right, to learn about, the Messiah and the location and so on and so forth, right? And and I have it right here. Another thing that I highlight. See, audience, get you a study Bible because it really helps me think about these things. The chief priests and scribes knew scripture well enough to identify Bethlehem as Christ's birthplace. Going backing up what David said about starting the prophecy, right? Like they knew scripture, especially like in the Old Testament. They just knew that's what they had to go off of to see things like that, right? And for the reference of that, what is I think it's pronounced Micah chapter 5 verse 2, and
Hmm.
and and this
Yeah.
brings up like that, the important portion of that verse, right? Of the out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel, right? Never, but nevertheless, later they opposed his teachings, and I thought this was so important in the notes. Knowledge of Scripture does not guarantee that your heart is right with God,
Hmm.
right? And I
Yeah.
think Micah chapter 5 Verse 2 foretold that Bethlehem would be the birthplace of a king, a ruler who would shepherd Israel. Although Micah said that the promised prince would rule over Israel, Matthew's translation says that Messiah will shepherd Israel. Um, I I bring up the part where it says knowledge of scripture does not guarantee your heart is right with God. That's important. That's important to think about because in the book of James, I don't remember which chapter, but in the book of James, where it says you be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word, right? How many people do we know of the church that can literally know every single chapter verse of this Bible from front to back, left side, right side, like they know it, right? They studied it, they read it, right? But if you're not like if you're not applying it right for it's written in your heart, right? When you're applying it and you're talking to God about these things, right? I just think I think it kind of combos that part of the note, right? Because you can have knowledge of scripture, but it doesn't automatically mean that oh my heart is right with the Lord because I know what the verse says about that.
Hmm.
Well then you can speak in tongues of the angels themselves, but if it's not out of love, you're just making noise, So I mean, I just thought that was that was important. That was important to know. Um, and to allure to seven because I just say 6 and 7. Herod secretly summoned the wise men, right? When I read that, I thought about that part too, and was like, okay, secretly, right? This was low key. Okay, this wasn't like a public meeting where it was like dinner table. No, he met with the wise men one on one, like one on one. Well, I guess 1 on 3, and asked them like the exact time the star appeared. Right, I this kind of allures right of how deceptive King Herod is trying to be,
Hmm.
right? Because he's trying to get this information from the wise men, right? Trying to find their locations, right? Because what he's telling them is because I want to go there and worship him too, right? That's what he's telling the wise men.
Hmm.
How, but as Mike says, we're gonna allure in the following verses. So just keep that in mind, right? Is that he's telling the wise men, I want to worship him too. Like report back to me where he is so I can go worship him. But again, that's not what's in his heart.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and I'll stop it right there, right? Because I want to allure to the following verses with keeping in mind that they were warned. They meaning the wise men were warned in a dream to not go back to King Herod. Okay, they were warned in a dream. Um, and so they returned to their own country. But just keep that in mind. They were warned not to go back to King Herod, and it was for a reason why.